The Surly Midnight Special, what is this bike? Is it a road bike? Is it a gravel race bike? Can you commute on it? Can you tour on it? Do I like it? Would I spend my actual cash dollars on this bike? Find out in this video. Welcome back, Pathless Peddlers, and if you're new to the channel, if you're into things like road plus bikes, gravel bikes, bike touring, and bike fishing, then definitely consider subscribing. You found your people. The Surly Midnight Special came out a couple weeks ago, and it was a bit of a head scratcher for some. What exactly is a fat tire road bike? And when I say fat tire road bike, I mean an actual fat tire road bike, not the roadie definition of a fat tire road bike, which is like 28 or 30 millimeters. What is that? Surly sent me a Midnight Special to review for a couple of days. I'm sending it back, unfortunately, but I've spent enough time with it to give you my thoughts and impressions of the bike. Full disclosure, all these opinions are my own. I'm not getting paid by Surly or QBP. In fact, you guys are helping me keep these video reviews independent every time you subscribe and donate to the channel. And that way I'm not reliant on advertising dollars from these brands. So in some ways, the Surly Midnight Special is kind of a pacer on steroids with really fat tires. Its geometry is definitely more in that road category than it is in the gravel bike category. Angles are a little steeper, wheelbase is a little shorter, and the chainstay is actually pretty short. I think it's only 425, which is pretty cool for a bike like this. At about 2,000 bucks, it is a little bit on the expensive side, I think, for a Surly, but it's nicely outfitted. It comes outfitted with a SRAM Rival group set, 11 speed, 5034 in the front, so compact double, and in the rear an 1132 cassette. So if you're a roadie, you're gonna feel right at home with this group set. If you like to explore and go on really steep terrain and need lower gears, then you might be changing either the front chain rings or getting a wider cassette in the back. Other things to note about the bike frame is that it does use the flat mount standard, for better or for worse. It's got these funny kind of dropout slash through axle things, which I don't fully understand. Actually, I'm going to be honest, I didn't fiddle with them too much because it was confusing. The bike's fork is pretty utilitarian. It's nothing fancy, kind of looks like a bunch of pipes welded together, but it is functional. It's got braze-ons on the shoulders of the fork, presumably for different rack options, as well as some mid-fork eyelet. I didn't try it, but it looks like you should be able to run lowriders, although given the geometry of the bike, I don't think it would necessarily be the best decision, but hey, the option is there for you to do. And of course, probably my favorite thing about the whole bike is that it uses the 650B wheel size, and it ships standard OEM with the WTB 650B by 47 millimeter tires. Nice and plush and supple. Not a whole lot of tread though. Mind you, keep that in mind. I'm going to talk really briefly about sizing. I kind of screwed up the request for the review bike I got. Typically, I ride between a 52 and a 54. Looking at the geo chart, the size 46 bike said it had an effective top tube, 52 millimeters. So I requested that, even though it sounded weird. And when it arrived, it was kind of weird. I had to swap things out, put a longer stem, a seat post with more setback. All that to say, definitely go to your local bike shop and get fit there and buy it from them. So how does this bike ride, and what is it for, and who is it for? My first impression when I hopped on the bike and took it around the block and did a short ride around town, my mind kind of melted momentarily because there were just two competing sensations. That of a quicker handling, zippier in the rear road bike feeling with the vibration dampening and all the suppleness from a big tire that you would normally expect from a touring bike or a gravel bike. So I was feeling two things that don't usually happen at the same time, polar opposites. And I have to say, I actually really liked it. I think typically when big brands design a bike, they definitely try to fit the design within boxes that are easy to categorize. So a road bike is generally going to handle like a road bike, no big surprises. A touring bike is going to handle like a touring bike. But the Surly Midnight Special for me was an interesting mix of different worlds. It had the responsiveness of a road bike, but all the suppleness that I generally associate with bikes that don't move as fast. So it was really strange at first to have a nice zippy bike, a bike that climbed well, a bike that moved when you put power to the pedals, but had really big and supple tires to kind of dampen all that road feel. And because of this contrast, I think it's actually one of the more unique bikes that I've ridden recently. I really encourage you, if you get a chance, to hop on one and tell me what you guys think. So I took the Surly Midnight Special on a couple of our Dirty Kansas training rides. So a typical road ride here in Missoula. always has a little bit of trail and mixed terrain. So on the road, it felt quick and nimble and wanted to carve the turns, but again, it had that sensation, that supple sensation that you don't usually associate with a road bike. When we hit patches of gravel, it still maintained its speed, and the big tires, again, really softened the impact of gravel and ruts and potholes and what have you. The ride actually reminded me a little bit of the Salsa Warbird in the rear. So in some ways you could almost mistake it for a gravel race bike. But I'll get back to this point a little bit further in the review. When we hit the Singletrack, this is when things got really interesting. Usually if I'm on a 28mm road bike, I'm kind of cringing at this point. But because of the big tires, again, you can hit those roots, you can hit those baby heads without feeling like your tires are going to explode and you're going to dent your rim. One thing I noticed personally for me is because of the smaller wheel size and tire size, I felt like I could pick my way through rocks a lot easier. Usually when I'm on a 29er bike or even my Salsa Cutthroat, which I do love, when I get on to technical single track, just because the wheel and tires feel so big for me, I feel like I'm aiming the bike rather than steering through things, if that makes sense. That front end handling on the Surly Midnight Special is light and nimble, and it's a blast even on mixed terrain. So does this make the Midnight Special a gravel race bike? Whoa, buddy. I do think the Midnight Special is super fun on gravel, but for me, I feel like I would enjoy it on gravel, but for kind of short to medium stretches at a time. Because the steering is so light and responsive, I feel like over a long haul on gravel, you get really fatigued kind of, staying on top of the steering. That said, it is super fun for those quick and short gravel excursions. So how does this bike ride to other bikes? So unfortunately, I've not ridden every single bike out there. I wish I have, but I'm gonna give you a frame of reference from the different bikes I've ridden personally. So compared to the Salsa Via, it's a little bit lighter. I think I weighed it on the bathroom scale and I got about 23 pounds-ish. It's in the low 20s. So not lightweight, but not super heavy. In terms of handling, the Surly Midnight Special is a much quicker bike than the Salsa Via. But that's okay, because the Salsa Via is meant to be an all-day rider, nice and stable, no surprises. If anything, the bike that the Midnight Special reminds me most of in our stable, it's probably the Warbird, but even that, the handling is a lot quicker on the Midnight Special than the Warbird. So as you can see, it definitely falls more in the road bike category than it does in the gravel or light touring bike. It's actually really hard to pin down the Surly Midnight Special right now because it's a bit of a category breaker, in my opinion. I don't think there are many bikes out there that use 650B or the Road Plus standard, whatever you want to call it, and maintain a short rear end and short overall wheelbase. So that way the Midnight Special is really unique. And although I've not ridden the Open Up bike, kind of idly looking at the geo charts, the Open might be its closest cousin, for lack of better words. Not sure completely, would love to test them side by side, but right now I'm going with that. There is very few bikes like the Midnight Special that have all that road bike quickness and goodness and responsiveness enveloped and wrapped within the loving casing of supple tires. So I think we live in a really interesting time for bicycles. I feel like if the Midnight Special came out when I was first getting into cycling, it would completely change my experience of what a road bike could feel like and could be capable of. So I'm pretty stoked on it. If you're looking for a road bike, an all-road bike, a bike that you could do spirited group rides with, mixed terrain rides with, commute on, maybe do even a little light touring, but doesn't feel like a touring bike, then I would definitely check out the Midnight Special. Again, go to your local bike shops, test ride them, buy it from them. And if you guys have any other questions about what I think of the Midnight Special, leave those in the comments below. And if you like this review or are interested in 650B bikes, you definitely want to subscribe. The next bike review video I'm going to do is on the Salsa Journeyman. Until next time, keep the supple side down.